Good morning, everyone. It's Coffee and Politics 101 with Sydney Walker, and we have my co host of Nigel Walker Banks here. And today we are joined by my Good morning, House Rep, Jasmine Crockett for House District 100. Thank you for joining us, State Rep. And we also have James Adams here. He does power delivery, USP. I will let him go into and explain all of that to have this discussion about what happened with our energy grid here in Texas during this fantastic winter storm that we had that brought us to record low temperatures for about 4 days. And people started experiencing rolling blackouts and complete loss of power, in addition to losing cell and internet and water during this storm. So good morning, guys, and thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, it's glad to be here. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So who wants to just go ahead, because both of y'all are returning guests. If you haven't seen James, he's been on the show where we have had roundtable discussions, and we had State Rep Jasmine Crockett on during her election time talking about criminal cases and reform in the justice system. So make sure that you go back and tune into those shows that are on Facebook. So we'll go ahead, State Rep.
Yeah, so first of all, good morning, James. Good morning, Nigel, and good morning, Sydney. I apologize for the background noise, but campaigning never stops. So I am actually headed to a block walk for one of my amazing city councilmen, Adam Bazaldua. But I'm excited to be here talking to you guys, especially about something that has been very confusing, frustrating, and deadly. And at the end of the day, you know, one of the things that I've determined about politics is that so many people make it a priority to confuse the roles of elected officials. And it's for reasons like this. It makes it a lot more difficult to know where to point the finger. And sadly enough, at this point in time, that's pretty much all we've got going on. It's people pointing the fingers, right? And so, you know, we're at a situation where basically we have the resignation of the PUC chair. We also had the firing of the, I guess he's the CEO. I think it was the CEO for ERCOT. And, you know, this is all scapegoating the issue.
Yes,
the issue boils down to elected officials on the state level, not the city, not the county, but the state level, that failed to implement regulations and laws that would prevent this type of catastrophic failure. While many want to blame the weather for our issue, that is yet another scapegoat. The reality is that the rhetoric has been, oh, you know what, it just got too cold, and you know, these are unprecedented cold temperatures, and that's just not true. It may not be everyday temperatures in the state of Texas, but the reality is that we see a lot colder weather in a lot other places. In addition to that,
you don't have the failures.
Texas prides itself on being number one for business, right? And bringing so many new businesses and industries to the state. But when you are bringing new people, which is what happens when you bring new business, you've got to make sure that your infrastructure is in place. And so that
population has doubled.
Expanding highways. That means expanding our broadband access. That also means, when it comes to our energy, expanding the overall amount of energy that we can actually afford, right? And so, you know, really, Texas has been playing Russian roulette with Texans' lives for quite some time. They had all of the indicators to know that this system could fail, yet they did nothing. So, you know, now everybody wants to pretend like they're really interested, and, you know, who knows? But I do believe that, in this particular instance, if they don't do something, they will be voted out. So, you know, as a freshman, it's tough because I didn't know who ERCOT was, to be perfectly honest. That's not something covered in freshman orientation.
James is the only one between the two of us who knew PUC and ERCOT. So, James, talk about, because, you know, you have a very unique specialty that you bring to the table. You do solar installation, but primarily you do the USP, which is the backup energy source for companies and data centers and whatnot. So introduce yourself and what your company does, and then we'll just kind of get into, you know, what was kicked off with the hearings and kind of how energy is produced and delivered.
Okay. Well, my name is James Adams. I own a company called Coaction Mission Critical Services. And what we do is we service the mission critical industry. So data centers, hospitals, schools, and we also do the O&M part of commercial solar systems. So I've been doing this, I got out of the Army 20 years ago, and I've been in this industry for 20 years. So when there's certain things in our industry that we hear that perk our ears up. So working with UPSs and backup power systems, battery backups and generators, you hear certain things that go on. Like when we hear outages at Facebook or Amazon or Delta a few years ago, guys like us already knew something happened in the data center because our job is to always keep power up. So we work in anything. We also do oil field and gas, not as much, but all of those controls that run those systems, they rely on backup power or redundant power systems or emergency power systems, depending on where you are, they call them different things. So my job is to commission systems like this, correct systems like this, and do consulting on systems like this. So when ERCOT's made announcements, or the governor came on, I think it was Friday or Saturday before the storm actually hit hard, and they started talking about rolling blackouts. I knew you can do rolling blackouts in the summertime because nobody dies of heat. They'll just start fanning themselves. But you can't do rolling blackouts in the winter for two things. In the summertime, if you cut people off, the load goes down. TVs go away, air conditioners go away, everything goes away. And you don't go from 80 degrees to 101 degrees in a matter of hours. That'll be a whole afternoon thing. But what you do when you cut people off in the middle of the winter is everybody was already told to conserve. So most people did back down from 71, 72, or 70, and we were at 67. We set it for 67 in our house. And as soon as they started talking about rolling blackouts, I knew that was never going to work, because what happens when you cut people off, you're making people colder by the minute. Yes. So when you turn everyone back on, everybody comes on at the same time. And, you know, my old house, we used to have it. You couldn't turn on the microwave, the curling irons, and the iron at the same time on the same plug, else you start tripping breakers. Right. So that's on a small scale of what we saw happening. Is everybody, when you turn people off in the wintertime, in the summertime, the load actually goes down when you turn people off and turn them back on. But in the wintertime, which is, nobody's ever heard of rolling blackouts in the wintertime, because when you turn people off, when you turn them back on, your load is even higher. So you have a system that was putting out, we'll just say one megawatt of power. When you turn them off in the wintertime, when you turn 1 megawatt off, which is close to 600, 700 houses, okay. When you turn them off, when you turn them all back, you turned them off because you were limited on power and you were ready to start blowing breakers at your substations. Well, when you turn them back on, they're actually coming back with a higher load, which
to eat everything back up. Is that what
they cut us off for exactly 15 minutes? Okay. Yeah, so we saw some discrepancies, and I started calling buddies, and buddies started calling me, and they were like, "Hey, are you seeing what's going on?" Yeah, it's not gonna happen. This is not. We already knew that wasn't rolling blackouts. That was a failure in the grid. But At that point, we didn't know what the failure was or what it was stemming from, because we still had a few more days of 20-degree weather to deal with.
Right. So Jasmine, I know you and I were watching the joint committee hearings, and the biggest takeaway that I got from it was, everyone was asked to start conserving on Sunday, and literally at 2:30 in the morning, people were being shut off with their power. And just listening to James talk about, the load and it being higher because we're doing these blackouts during the wintertime. I know that was a huge issue with the committee hearings about the communication to people and when this communication started going down. So tell me what your thoughts were listening to those committee hearings, because people who were impacted in House District 100 that didn't have power.
Yeah, so what was quite frustrating, and I want to say on that Tuesday is when I submitted for a draft for a bill that would require, just like we do Amber Alerts, it would require an actual alert to go out to people's cell phones. We're running into issues because the feds are the ones that kind of dictate kind of how to do that. So we're trying to wiggle around that. But the reality is that they knew at a very minimum that basically the plane was crashing a week before the event. The briefing that we had on that Sunday was that, hey, we've got to, make sure that we're conserving energy because the demand is really, really high. The temperatures are dropping, which is going to further increase demand. We're asking that you guys, tell your constituents, let them know, hey, try to reduce, the temperature in your homes to 68 degrees. But first of all, information does not travel instantaneously in any way. And everybody gets information in different ways. You've got some that get it via TV, some that get it via radio, some that get it via social media, some that literally you got to pick up the phone and call, some that get it via text message. Like, it was absolutely impossible to, in my opinion, to get the information to enough people. And frankly, the attitudes of most people was not really what I would like it to be. They were like, if I pay my bill, I should be able to turn my energy up to 100 degrees, and it shouldn't be a problem. And I don't disagree with the theory. I don't. But the reality was the plane was crashing, and I don't think they never really conveyed it to us that way either.
How serious it was.
You say what?
How serious it was. How serious?
Yeah, no, they didn't know. It was more like, and it wasn't even that. I mean, we literally were seconds from complete blackout, like for at least a month or so. I mean, it's absolutely insane that they did not let us know how significant it was. Like, for me, I basically was like, all right, well, I'll decrease, the temperature at my home, and that was kind of bad. Like, I didn't. They made it.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in and add to what you just said on that part about the almost on the brink? Because a lot of people ask, well, we were just minutes away from being down for months. Yes. What they meant by that is, when I said they started shedding power. Well, what's come out since they started having the hearings is, we assume that they were cutting power because of their breakers. They had two problems going on. One, they were trying to shed load from us because they were trying to save on their emergency bill. But what happened is it got away from them. And what's coming out in the hearings is the reason they say we were minutes away from being months down is because the size breakers that they use at substations and that they use at electrical rooms, those are very large custom ordered breakers. All those breakers get ordered months ahead of time in designs and engineering. And normally on our lead time, if we have a system, when we go and test breakers, if we have a breaker of those sizes that go bad, we have to figure a way to to route that power because lead time on a breaker those sizes is in the months. It's in 6 to 8 months. Our smaller breakers, which are 25,000 amps, I would have to wait as much as 12 weeks on breakers like that. And those breakers are $50,000 to $100,000 a breaker. The gas operated breakers.
These are not items.
The gas operated breakers in the millions.
So these are custom ordered, not
everything is custom ordered and engineered to spec.
Okay, so none of this stuff is just sitting on the shelf that I can just go in and pull it off the shelf and then run my debit card or credit card to order this. And
because with good maintenance and good planning, you don't have that. Okay. What we saw here is that the main failure of everybody was ERCOT and PUC. Only a few people on ERCOT's board, because I looked up their biographies, about half the people on the board are technical. Some are lawyers. On the PUC, we had no technical person leading the Public Utility Commission. Two were accountants with law degrees, and the other one had no technical degree at all. And that's
no science background, nothing like that. No,
their job was to make sure a monopoly looks like privatized industry, which was completely for profit. The PUC was not looking out for the people. The PUC was looking out for the bottom lines of the company, and some weird Reagan-style trickle-down theory that if we charge the companies a penalty for going over use, that'll trickle down to the customer some kind of way. I'm not even sure how that was supposed to work.
Okay, so going back to those hearings and seeing that people were on the commissions and on the boards for these organizations really didn't seem to have the best interests of the citizens and residents of Texas. So there was a whole bunch of discussion during these hearings. And I know on the media side of it, it was discussion of winterization. Like things were freezing up that shouldn't have, and the companies opted not to winterize because no one really made them. It was going to be too expensive. And then, listening to the hearings on Thursday and Friday, it was like, no, we winterized. And it's kind of like, what the flop happened? So
I'll let Miss Crockett, because I think it's good because she can come from the state side, and I can definitely talk technical, but okay. Sometimes my technical goes too far. So I'll let Miss Crockett run with most of it. If she can.
Okay, sorry, my phone had cut out on this drive, but yes, they talked about the fact that winterization, it basically was optional. It wasn't mandated. It was, we recommend that you should. Now there are some that actually did winterize and they may have fared better, but at the end of the day, this came down to profits over people. Like if it's going to cost you more money and somebody just made a suggestion that you do it, well, that's cutting into your profits. So forget that. Like, I don't care about a suggestion. It's like, I'm only going to do it if it's mandated. And part of the reason that we're not even on the federal grid is this desire to get around mandates of a certain level. And so, yes. Yeah. And so, now going forward, I mean, everybody's like, oh, regulate. But, we'll see what comes out of it. We've already changed the conversation and started talking about masks and the fact that the governor decided to get rid of masks, right? Like, let's stop talking about the storm. Let's stop talking about, the things that matter, the fact that people are still dying, that we still don't know how many people have died, the fact that people suffered medical emergencies, the fact that people cannot afford to fix their homes. And so our homelessness rate is about to go up. Like, we don't want to talk about that anymore. right? So let's start talking about masks. That's one way to dig in really deep and get some of that big red meat, as I would call it, right? It's actually pretty sickening. And the fact is, most people don't realize that they're just playing games with y'all's lives, right? Like, what I've been trying to tell my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is, listen, you had Republicans, independents, Democrats, gays, straights, trans, everybody that suffered. There was no one that was immune from this, unless you hopped on, your private jet, which one of my classmates did, or if you were, cruise and you just took commercial and got up out of here. But the reality was it did not, you didn't look at the grid and see blue or red. No. You ended up pulling everybody off. So this is something that truly maybe we can start to get people to think through, because what happens when we have these elections is they start talking about what's going on in the next person's uterus. And that becomes a big issue, right? It's a distraction. Like, my deal is, you know what? You need to start voting for yourself. And voting for yourself means that you're going to vote for elected officials that will put in regulations that will ensure that when you need energy the most, that you have it, whether it's during the peak season during the summer or whether it's during the peak season during the winter, because that may cost you your life, not whether or not another woman has an abortion. That ain't got nothing to do with you, right? Not whether or not men and men want to sleep together, right? Like, that has nothing to do with you if you ain't trying to do it, right? But
or playing the national anthem at sporting events.
Absolutely. Like,
yes.
All of that is just games. That's games because, if you look at those that are at the top 10%, right? Like, they're voting that way because they looking out for their pockets. When people keep talking about, well, who got rich? Who benefited? Well, I can tell you who didn't benefit, right? The majority of Texans didn't benefit. No. But there are definitely people that walked away who were already rich that only got richer in this catastrophic event, right?
Every natural gas company in Texas.
You say what?
Every natural gas company in Texas made out like bandits.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely did, right? And guess what? They will put limitless amounts of money into campaigns to get their candidates into office. I mean, I have seen it where literally there was one oil tycoon, oil and gas guy, put $500,000 into one candidate. Nobody else was really putting into him. $500K, right? So when they're picking their loyalty, they may come at you and say, oh, this is about being a Christian. Well, being a Christian ain't got nothing to do with politics, to be perfectly honest. Right? Like, go to church for your Christianity.
Contribution to someone's campaign that
absolutely
being masked as, oh, I have the same biblical values as you, and completely.
Those are dog whistles.
Yeah. So James,
those are dog whistles.
Yes. So James, I do want to ask you about, because we talked about winterization. So some companies did it, some companies did it, and so there was part of the discussion during the hearings about natural gas freezing. And I had to go back to my organic chemistry days. And I'm like, natural gas is a vapor and it has to be cooled to negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was well below what we experienced.
Negative 200 degrees.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we saw is I kind of wondered where that was going. So it was either the CEO, the president of Atmos Energy, explained, hey, our pipes didn't freeze. We got cut off. And that was a mind-blowing thing to me, because that made me realize nobody is in control of how these guys operate, not in normal times and not in desperate times like in the middle of summer, middle of winter, when you get the most draw. What we have, we do what we call breaker coordination studies in critical facilities. And when we're part of that study is what load is critical and what load can be shed in times of emergency. So when you see generators outside of a data center, if it loses power, there's redundancy. So if one grid goes out, a lot of times they have a second grid that'll power. If those go out, then I have batteries. and that'll get me over the generator and back over. So what we saw is we coordinate which breakers trip out, which breakers stay on when the generator comes on. So in a building, when the generator comes on, Coke machines, microwaves, break rooms, non-critical loads get shed. They get cut off. They don't get powered. Critical loads like your IDF closets, your phone closets, your data centers, your servers, your phones, those kind of things that are critical to business, they stay on. That's why we call it mission critical. And they're mission critical loads. And one of the things you have to have a plan on where you want to be. Go ahead. You look like you were going to say something.
Yes. So, Jasmine, I see that you are prepared to start block walking. So I do want to send you on your way. I know you said that you would do the full hour, but I know that you're out there helping my city councilman, Adam Bazadula, get reelected. So in any closing, so you propose a bill that you want people to know about what's going on with the Texas legislature that we need to pay attention to make sure that we are holding our state and Senate accountable to us, the people.
Yeah, so I think everybody kind of got a crash course in these committee hearings and started watching. It's important that we don't let this kind of be a fleeting issue, that we stay on top of it. Our legislature only meets once for 6 months every 2 years. So therefore, whatever goes into place has to go in place now. Our filing deadline is approaching. It is March 12th. So next Friday, or this upcoming Friday, is going to be our filing deadline. I had to get a crash course. I had to talk to people that are, half as smart as James to figure out what is it that I need to file to protect our people, because I can't tell my constituency, well, this isn't what I do, when it's not what I do. But I've been elected, and it was my job to figure out what needs to be done. So I have filed, or I've submitted for drafts for a number of things. One of the things that James does seemingly is make sure that he installs these solar panels. So, as far as I'm concerned, we can decrease the demand on the grid overall if we do more solar panels, especially on homes. They are quite expensive. And so I actually am submitting for a bill that would provide for a property tax rebate for 6 years in the amount of $2,500 a year for those 6 years, if somebody does decide that they want to install solar panels. In addition to that, there were some issues as it relates to people who did have solar panels. I didn't understand that power goes straight to the grid. So there were a number of people that were producing power, and they were still in the dark. And that was beyond insane to me, because basically their power.
After you get off, if she wants to go back to, after you get off, if she wants to go back to that, I can explain that right there.
So I actually am submitting for a bill that would prioritize and make sure that whatever energy someone generates actually goes to their home, and it's only the overage that goes to the grid instead. There are, and overall, the idea of microgrids, right? Basically, solar panels are nothing but like little microgrids. But in our big, large urban centers, definitely I want to push for like installing more kind of microgrids, if that kind of makes sense. I've got a professor at UT.
I did an electric company up in eastern Oklahoma 7 years ago. It was a rural co-op electric plant. But again, they're on the national grid. What they were doing is they were giving solar panels away to people because they're rural and they don't have to go on the roof. They had space in the yard for them. They were giving 7 kW grid panels already set up. They were on the frame. The guys would come out, set it up, supply it, hook it in, give you the green meter, and you paid it off on your electric bill. But because what that did, that allowed people that were distant to still feed the grid. And now they don't have to keep paying the operator. See, our setup is set up just to keep the operators in the natural gas business. It doesn't care about the customer.
Well, and honestly, so that's a big deal, because we are having those arguments about because gas failed. the governor wants everybody to blame wind, and that is the answer for why the storm happened. That is not true. No. So I am just overall pushing for more diversity. Overall, even they can't really argue that much with solar. They are still fighting against wind a lot. But I believe that we just need to diversify this reliance. We rely a little too heavily on gas. When we talk about regulations, one of the issues that we had is that the gas lines were not insulated well enough because they weren't buried deep enough, half of them. It's kind of like the explosion that we had, right? So it's just this idea of kind of like skirting responsibility, doing whatever is cheapest to maximize my profits. And it's not that you won't have profits, and it's not that they won't be crazy big profits, but it's like, what? If I can do it, and they've continued to do that. And so the Railroad Commission somehow has escaped responsibility as well. There is responsibility there. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to who is running for the Railroad Commissioner. We definitely lost a great candidate this last session when we did not vote in Krista Castañeda. We continually vote for folk that don't even have any understanding of oil and gas whatsoever. Instead, they are just funded by oil and gas, right? And so, we've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about potentially pushing for the PUC chair to be an elected official. That's something that Representative Rafael Anchia is considering. Even though, obviously, in the current state of Texas, that person would most likely be a Republican. It's a little different when you're running for re-election versus I'm just appointed to this and I'm here so long as I want to be. You start to operate just a little bit differently. And so we may be able to kind of center some of the decisions that the PUC makes if we go ahead and make like that kind of one elected official versus the governor being able to appoint 3 elected officials. So, I think I've done about probably 5 or 6 drafts of just various things from the notification, which doesn't fix anything, but hopefully does prevent the loss of life or minimize the loss of life, all the way to dealing with, obviously, just encouraging and incentivizing solar panels and things like that in homes. So, we'll see what happens. We'll see how people vote. I plan to stay very vocal. Just so y'all know, I'm now on TikTok and we're blowing up on TikTok. And that is the easiest way for me to really blast somebody. Seemingly everybody's paying attention. So we literally just got our first video to go over 100K. So wow. I'm trying to make sure that we are presenting the information that needs to be presented in a very concise and fun, digestible way. So you guys can follow us on all social media platforms. It's Jasmine for 100, JASMINE FOR 100. And we will stay on top of this. We will do our best to stay, keep you informed. Sydney normally jumps onto our monthly town hall, which takes place every second Tuesday of the month. You guys are welcome to join. You're welcome to ask very transparent questions. I'm very honest and real. I just don't really know how to be any other way. But I do love you so much, Sydney. James, I appreciate your knowledge and you lending that knowledge to the people, because knowledge truly is power. We really will get through this, but only so long as we hold people's feet to the fire. So I appreciate y'all. I'm going to get out here and do the hard work.
Before you get out here, I want you to say hi to one of your constituents. She can't vote for you.
Look, we got a house full.
Yeah, right.
So I am hoping to turn this over because my teenagers, they're the up and coming. So they need to get out here and get engaged and start making their voices heard, along with this one here, who's only 7, grooming him to take over even after them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jasmine Crockett for tuning in and updating us on what's going on in Austin. So I will let you go so you can get to work. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All righty. So James.
All right. So she touched on a few things that I want to. Well, go ahead. I'll follow you.
Yeah, the energy delivery. I mean, for me, it was so infuriating to listen to the hearings. And although I am not in your industry, as far as energy delivery, I
kind of you are.
And so I have migrated a data center. You know, I understand, you know, making how to structure things where, you know, you have the support, you have, you know, the most updated equipment is running at a place for peak efficiency, because I was dealing with a hospital system. So bodies on the table, we can't let things fail, because that means someone could lose their life unnecessarily. So, you know, talk, and really, again, like Jasmine brought up with the solar panels and pushing the diversity, you know, there were a lot of people that were and you were blocking me, anti-wind production, and saying that that was the failure of our system.
No. All right. So as things started going bad, you know, again, I've been doing this for 20 years, so most of my friends do this too. So when we call each other, we're like, man, did you hear that? You know, because first he started with, I'm not sure which one went first. Was it solar and wind was the problem first, or if it was gas that was first? But I know Abbott flip-flopped on the same day on which problem it was. Right. I believe, so we knew there's a problem, but you know, again, we didn't know it was this bad. We assumed somebody was steering the ship. But listening to the hearings, you know, a couple things that came out of it is the PUC, one, was manned with people who did not know the industry, and they didn't understand power at all. So not only did they not just understand power, they didn't understand power delivery.
Okay.
So they understood policy, because they are all former policy guys, but they didn't understand how critical they couldn't have, because if they had, this was an even bigger tragedy than what it is if they actually understood what was at hand. But I think again, this goes back to politics of that ostrich with his hand in the sand policy of, hey, climate change is not happening. We can drill, we can do whatever we need. We need to support the natural gas industry. Well, we've supported the natural gas industry to the point where people go, hey, why isn't solar bigger in Texas than what it is? Well, it's been suppressed. All the lawyers who can give us benefits, like I love her talking about giving some tax relief for people who want to move towards solar. But what we have to do with that is we have to raise the general knowledge of how solar actually operates. She touched on
I definitely want to take a comment here that's on YouTube. It's from Daniel Favors. He says that federal mandates would have cost money, of course. Having and maintaining a predictive maintenance program would have also cost money. And Texas opted for a waiver in favor of profit. And I know we definitely discussed that. But Daniel also brings up that wind and solar power are less reliable due to environmental conditions, as we have discovered. Now, you're in the business of doing installations. So there seems to be a lot of misconception about.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Because I wanted I'm kind of chomping at the bit to get that down. But go ahead.
A lot of misconceptions about using the alternative non-fossil fuel energy delivery. And you're in the business of doing non-fossil fuel energy delivery, solar power. So talk about that reliability, because after the snowstorm, I'm sure all those little guys knocking on people's doors, people are signing up left and right to get solar power.
To get solar. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to touch on the windmills in the cold. If you look at any video of any scientific exploration or any military endeavor in the Antarctic, they are all running power on wind. They all have a wind turbine outside their tent or outside their building.
Okay.
So the thing is, Texas hadn't relied on wind and solar because they've kept them down. Now, what you see in Lubbock and the high plains area, the plains areas from Amarillo all the way down to San Angelo and even farther down, you see windmill, you see wind power. Wind power is huge, but in the summertime when winds are higher and sun is longer, they count up for almost, sometimes in some points, depending on who you look at, what papers you look at, they make up almost 30% of the grid. But in the wintertime, they're not even counted as reliable. They don't carry as much. They're not required to put out because they know that some of their peak output is seasonal. So in the wintertime, your winds are not as high as in the summer times or in the warmer months. And also from October to February, you can look at the numbers in the ERCOT papers or the PUC. They show that we go from 20-30% demand is used in renewables in the summertime to only like around 12% of our load is demanded from. And so of that, so that was never a big player in our wintertime loads. Our wintertime loads are natural gas, coal, and in East Texas, which is a different story, a lot of that is biomass, which is, chipped trees, paper, and that kind of trash that'll do the same thing. But it's solar in the wintertime is actually more efficient. What we see in the summertime.
Because I saw all kinds of comments on Facebook. Well, when the snow falls on your solar panels, it's going to cover it up so the sun doesn't reach it. So it's not going to be able to recharge. The wind turbines, they're going to freeze up. And it was just like such anti-renewable energy production.
Right. Because they're talking things they don't know. Because when the wind turbine is not producing power, it's turned with the wind, not against the wind. All right. So in order for it to turn, it's got to be facing the wind. When they don't want it operational, they'll turn it sideways so it's not spinning. You see it on the old windmills that used to pump water back in the days ago, and you see it now. They'll just turn off. Now the thing is, you have on the ground level it was 16 degrees. What is it 150 feet up, where the wind is actually higher? So now you're talking about one. They weren't looking for load from wind in the wintertime. Anything they got from wind in the wintertime was a plus. So if we've only got you figured in at 12%, if we get 15% from you, hey, we just have more energy on the grid. Good thing. Same thing with solar. You have gray days, like today is a great day. But between October and February, you have gray days where production is going to be lower. Again, that's only factored into that 12%. Anything you get past that is a bonus. More energy on the grid. So to go back to solar panels, the one thing that keeps solar panels from being as efficient as they can be is heat. So in the summertime, when my guys are doing preventive maintenance on solar panels, we'll see voltage actually drop as the sun comes up. You would think it's the other way around, that the more sun you get, the more. Now, what happens is heat plays into that, and it starts taking away from voltage, and it creates line losses. So when I have the ability to keep my solar panels cool, like now when it's 40 degrees outside, and I have full sun, no clouds, that's a perfect day for a solar panel. That's a perfect day for an array because I'm making power, but I'm not creating heat.
So heat is a rate limiting factor with solar power production, which is contradictory because heat is what generates power. Is the I hate
It's actually it's the light. It's the light that creates the power.
Okay.
But heat is a byproduct. Heat is a byproduct. Yes. So the plate, the glass, the aluminum frames, if you have it on the roof, you still get some sun that hits your tiles. Right. But again, when you're looking at the ratings of solar panels, they're already rated for that loss. Again, anything you get above that voltage, because most of my systems are running 770, 780 volts. But in the morning time, I can come in and my voltage is 860 volts. That's just extra. That's already, that loss is already factored in when you look at the wattage on your solar panels. And when you look at the total wattage of a system, that's already, even shady days, those are already factored into systems.
To kind of break it down and kind of paint that picture for people to really understand. So, and I was going in the incorrect direction with heat, because heat is the byproduct. Heat
is a byproduct.
So for those who have taken chemistry, those bonds breaking in your car with the combustible engine, with the pistons going up and down and putting the vapor in there, and then spark plug doing its ignite, and that gas being exploded, that heat that's produced is part of what generates the engine going. So solar panels aren't any different. Coal.
Well, they are different. They are different. What happens, our heat comes from the actual solar thermal. We run from radiant energy, but the sun also has thermal energy. And again, you're talking about electrons. Well, here you're talking about electrons instead of combustion, where in that heat, they actually use that heat and explosion for power. Ours, what happens is it creates a loss in transmissible power as the lines heat up, and as the panels heat up, I start losing power. So the perfect situation for a solar panel is a cool sunny day like today.
Okay.
I'll get more power out of a solar panel today than I will in July.
Wow. And so that is one thing that people don't know about that, because you think solar panels, peak time.
Now, right. And she touched on another subject when people were like, hey, I have solar panels on my house. Why is my house still dark? That is, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, because that's confusing.
What that is that's a failure in people not knowing how solar systems actually work. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that oil and gas has run Texas for so long that renewables, like if you go to Arizona, you go to California.
Yeah, you see more.
People can tell you what systems do because they are a large part of that economy. But you come here and it's, hey, drill, baby, drill. When we really don't have to drill, baby, drill. A lot of our power couldn't be coming from solar. But what's happening is when you have these guys coming into your neighborhood to sell your system, they're doing two things. They'll go, hey, we'll put these panels on your house for free. Well, really, it's not for free. These companies make their money by selling power to the grid. All they're doing is using your roof. If you're not buying your system, those companies are just using your roof as free space to create energy for their company. So when you see a company that can come out and put 60, and it's crazy how they do it. Go ahead.
Okay, time out. Because yes, when you sign up to get those solar panels put on your roof, you were thinking that now you no longer get an electric bill, which is not true. If you're
not
just
true.
Generating power for the company, so you were still on the grid.
Right.
It's still an electric bill. So people, I'm sure, that have signed up for these programs are kind of going, wait a minute, why am I still having to write a check? Why are you still, contacting me about
because they don't own the system. If you own the system, so back in the day, if you had a windmill or you had a solar plant on your house, it would have to be what we call make or break. You're either on the grid or you're on your solar panels, or your windmill. Okay. But now they have technology, what we call grid tie. So I have Encore here or Reliant, whoever your power is, Austin Energy. I have power here, and my solar panels are creating power here. What they do is they actually match each other, and part of the power comes to your house, and part of the power goes to the street. The part of the power that goes to the street comes as credit. If you own your system, it becomes a credit on your electric bill. So the times you're at work, back in the day before COVID, when people went to work and school, and the house was just sitting there, those solar panels were still creating energy. What they were doing is actually creating a negative they were creating credits on your electric bill. So you still had an electric bill because solar doesn't work at night. So you needed a source, unless you wanted to go completely off grid with batteries or something like that. You would still have an electric bill. So you pay that minimal electric bill, but the power companies like Encore, they were buying your power back. So as they were buying your power back, you were creating credits. And some people don't have, if you own your own system, you can go without an electric. If you build it right and you size it right, you won't have an electric bill. Versus, hey, we'll put these panels on your house for free. You don't own the system, they do. They can come and maintain the system anytime they want to because it's their system.
Right.
And
they're just
the only thing that
your property with a credit on your electric bill for
the only thing they offer is a discount on the electric bill that you already think is high. I try to steer all my friends away from those kind of deals. I'm like, hey, if you want solar panels, they're getting cheaper and cheaper because people are not, we're having more and more issues like the ERCOT PUC thing. Plus people are seeing $700 electric bills. It's like, hey, all I have to do is pay, I could put in a solar system and finance it.
Because that air conditioning in Texas will make you have a car note for an electric bill.
Right.
I've seen those.
Right. So I can deal with a $700 electric bill a month or a $600 electric bill a month, or I can finance this solar system and my electric bill is only $20 a month.
Yeah. And that
it pays out. People try to look at their return on cost, but it pays off pretty quick.
But then during all of this storm of, the storm of the century and ERCOT, PUC, all of them knew that our system was vulnerable. 1989, it was vulnerable. Leadership was told, you're vulnerable. 2011, we were vulnerable again. It just wasn't felt like it was with this last storm that we had. And so, I'm hoping that this show encourages people, one, to hold your elected officials accountable because they're appointing people on these commissions, on these boards, that are not looking at your best interests. And so I worked in IT, been a change manager. You're the good bad cop. You're approving change requests and making sure everything is documented correctly. So your change request doesn't blow up the production system. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I want to be on ERCOT. Heck, cannot do any worse than anybody else. At least I will ask, questions. But somebody will look at me and say, well, you don't have any experience. Well, apparently you didn't have to have any to be on it.
And really, there's no need for an ERCOT.
Why?
There's no need for an ERCOT. What ERCOT is doing is, there's no, one, what is ERCOT doing that the PUC is not already charged with? Nothing. The ERCOT is just so the PUC doesn't have to hire people to do it.
So it
just adds to me it adds a middleman and it adds a finger to point at. Hey, all of these producers and all this, and they can say what they want to say, but when most of the leaders are power generators on your board, ERCOT's not going to do what it has to do because the people that they have to do it to is themselves. So you cannot have the fox guarding the hen house. And those are all foxes. And then the people running the hen house have no clue what a fox does for a living. And so they have regulatory, when you look at the bios of these folks, they've been on these commissions, but they served as legal capacities. They've served in advising capacities with legal aspects on what you can and what you can't do, as far as the EPA and government standards and federal regulations, but not what you should be charged with which is keeping Texans alive and healthy. Because where I was going in that first part, when I went off on a rant that first time, as far as picking what your critical loads are, what came out when the president, I'm not sure if it was the president or CEO of Atmos Energy, which is our gas people, he said they never identified critical loads. So when they started shutting people off randomly to save themselves, they also shut off the gas pipelines. So they say the gas froze, but what they were trying to do in order to keep from paying that penalty fee, they started shedding loads. They started cutting people off. But by not having a plan of who gets cut off or what gets cut off, they just started throwing breakers. And a lot of times those breakers were the gas lines, the pump stations and everything that feed them. So you can't get gas when you cut the gas guy off.
So they were masking the pipes freezing for a product that becomes liquid at negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. And so, and one of those things that they said, which again just raised all antenna. They were like, well, water froze in the gas pipelines. It was like, there is no water in gas pipelines. Those gas pipelines don't just come out. There's so many different changes that happen to gas before it ever gets to the customer. It gets scrubbed 2 or 3 times. It goes through pumps. It gets a smell added to it so you can tell that the gas is even in the air.
Yes.
There is no water in natural gas when it comes through, because if there was, the only way you would have water introduced after you took the water out already is the only way you would have water introduced is if you had a broken pipe. And if you had a broken pipe, you'd already know it because you'd have a pressure failure. So we know the water in the lines didn't freeze because there is no water in the lines. And we know the gas didn't freeze because I don't think it got to negative 200 degrees. I just don't think it did.
Yeah,
I know
it get below the point that natural gas becomes liquid in order to freeze. Because now you're talking about an incredible amount of pressure being added to that, in addition to having even more severe negative temperature in order to make it freeze. And anybody who's taking chemistry, and I keep plugging this because this is taking me back to my Richland College days, Brookhaven, and at TWU, taking organic chemistry, taking inorganic chemistry, and knowing that, because we're talking about alkynes and alkenes, these hydrocarbons do not behave in ways that we are accustomed to seeing liquids that we consume that freeze at such, higher temperatures than these hydrocarbons, because that's basically what we're talking about here. I do want to take another. Daniel Favors, thank you for tuning in today and raising all of these questions. So he does ask, will there be an after action review? So I will definitely pose that to the state reps and state senators that I know on what is coming up after the joint committee hearings that have been had on the Energy Committee in Austin. They had their discussion on Monday of this week. So I'm curious to see what is going to happen. State Rep Jasmine Crockett, she's proposed a bill for this kind of thing not to happen again, making sure that consumers get better communication and messaging for such critical times. But James, I want to go back to, you talking about, this energy delivery and the failure to not recognize what was a critical load and making sure that, and here's me being Stevie Wonder, I'm just flipping breakers and not caring who ends up going down.
That's just, it's so irresponsible. I think it's criminal because there was no oversight at all. PUC claims they have the oversight, or ERCOT claims they have the oversight over all the producers, but there was no oversight. We have policy and we have laws, or we have guidance, but the guidance has no teeth. It has no enforcement capability other than, oh, if we get to this point, then you'll pay this penalty. Well, what happened is we went from 2021 to 2011 to 2021, almost 10 years, without any major events.
Right.
So I guess, I don't know if they got complacent, if they got lax, or if they just didn't give a damn, because right now it looks like they just didn't give a damn. But definitely, because, reading Dallas Weekly's, I said it was Texas Monthly, but reading Dallas Weekly's page where Ambit and Stream Energy, their CEOs, saw this coming 2 years ago. They said, hey, if we ever have to pay these bills, we'd go broke. So they sold because they saw that the producers weren't, the generators weren't making any changes. ERCOT wasn't making any changes. And the PUC wasn't making any changes because they didn't understand what the changes even meant. They just saw profit. This is all, and Jasmine said it was profit over people, because this maintenance is not expensive. These upgrades, if there are any upgrades, are mostly are engineering studies. Hey, if I do get to the cap, let me make sure when I start killing power, I don't kill my gas pump upstream.
Yes.
Which makes sure I stay down. So now I got to get back up, which is a crazy loop because I need natural gas to get back up. But I already cut the natural gas off. So how do I get back up without bringing in other generators to start you back up?
That's what the problem was, and why President Biden had to get us some generators, because we cut off our nose to fight our fight.
I think the size of those generators were just, if I have a hospital down, I can take 3 or 4 over there and hook them up. But, in reality, those generators, by the time they hit the truck, they were already late. Because, again, it was a freeze. It wasn't a flood, and it wasn't a hurricane. But I think those generators were probably already here in the state, to tell you the truth. But I don't know. I'm just speculating.
That's going on with our government systems.
Well, it's a lot. So I saw where these companies didn't have heat trace. Heat trace is basically you have a pipe and you have a cord that wraps around a pipe, and then they plug it into a 240 source or 208 source. And what it does is it's just like a heater, your curling irons or whatever. It's just a heater that goes around a coil. And all that is it makes the pipe warm. Heat trace. I don't know why they call it heat trace. It's kind of a weird name for, I guess they couldn't call it heat lining. But what that does is it keeps any pipes, outside pipes that come up out of the ground from cooling. So a lot of times, when I helped run the Bank of America data center for work, that was one of our checks to make sure the heat trace around those pipes on the outside going into the chillers and going into the cooling units, that they, even though we weren't using cooling, we were bringing hot air out of the building to put it out and bringing cool water in to cool it off. But you had to make sure those pipes didn't freeze. So, and that's just a data center. That's just, a team of 10 guys. And all we're doing is taking care of our customer, which is our boss, Bank of America at the time.
Right.
But these guys are running, I saw pictures of frozen pipes in this, and that's not winterization. That's just common. I run a factory kind of thing. When you go there's no plant in Texas. There's no plant in North America, I don't believe, that doesn't have heat tracing already spec'd, already lined, already engineered. if they don't have heat trace on their systems, that's because one, they either let it fail, or they're not doing proper maintenance and didn't notice it. But these are things that facility managers are supposed to recognize if they're qualified, facility managers, and not, my buddy is my buddy kind of deal.
Our overseers are supposed to be catching this. So Daniel did bring up a question that there were no lessons learned in 1989 and 2011. You've been in this industry for quite some time. We were roughly the same age. So no lessons learned, or just, we're just gonna ride it out. And we know how Texas weather is. We can have an ice storm one day and the next day the sun comes out and all the ice is gone. And was that, because me as a layperson who suffered through having power for 15 minutes to Thursday night at almost midnight saying, wow, we've been able to watch Prometheus the entire time. Is the power back on to stay?
Right.
It felt like, oh, well, everybody could just ride it out. It's Texas. Y'all know how the weather is. It'll be back and everything will be good in a day or two.
But that comes with the whole, I don't believe the earth is warming. I don't believe the earth is changing. I don't believe cycles happen, because I wasn't alive the last time it did. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. They didn't do either. They were just like, hey, bring me the money. That was their whole thing. Bring me the money.
Well, I know that, I want to say New York Times, it could have been the Wall Street Journal, did an article that talked about how Texans on this independent grid have paid $29 billion more for electricity as part of this deregulation. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, I do not want to have regulation over everything, because they'll get to the point where you regulate how I breathe and how deep I can take my breaths and whatnot. But we have to have the appropriate amount of regulation in the appropriate areas, because obviously deregulation didn't help the consumer, as it was so that you could pick and choose who you get your electricity from, when we pretty much know it's only a couple of big companies out there that are actually doing the production that feed it to the little guys who we get our bills from every month.
Right. Now there are over 700, there are over 600, I think it's right at 680 generators in the state of Texas, but I'm not sure what they call generators. Are they calling 1 megawatt solar plants? Are they calling that a generator? Okay. Or are they just calling the big industrial generators that are at the lake impoundments? Are they calling those generators? Or are they calling the whole field or half a field of windmills? Are those generators? I'm not sure what their standard generator is. I'm pretty sure I could look it up. But that went off on a real tangent. Because I was trying to get to where you were actually talking about.
Yeah, so having the appropriate amount of regulation, because it's clear that when the kids are left to their own devices, we jack stuff up. And I try not to curse on my show, and I've done it a couple of times, so I'm gonna try and so under 18 can watch the show. Companies, and I tell people this all the time, even with removing the mask mandate, people will only do what you force them to do. Companies, for sure, and we have seen this time and time again, will only do what they are forced to do. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do is not something that just happens. Because if that's the case, we wouldn't have this catastrophe last week, 2 weeks ago.
Well, that's true. And the thing is, you have to start with smart people. But yeah, I think first you have to start off with the right mission. Let's take care of people.
Right.
And all of that, I think everything past that will fall in line. So what the PUC needs to look at, what the legislatures need to look at, what is the PUC actually charged with? And what is ERCOT actually being, contracted to do? Because basically They aren't the state of Texas. They are a private organization that runs things for the state of Texas. Do we even need them? You know, Manguson, I think that was the CEO's name. Why is he getting $800,000?
Right.
What did he do? You
right.
know, he was, you know, everybody made it sound good because he denied his golden parachute of another $800,000 because he got fired. But,
right.
you know, what is he doing for $800,000? And, you know, where does ERCOT make their money? Do they make their money from the state, or do they make their money from the people that they're supposed to watch over? Because if they're making their money from the people that they're supposed to overwatch, that's already a bad deal. If the ERCOT is not, go ahead.
I'm saying they're getting fed from the people that they're supposed to oversee and call on the carpet.
Right.
So if you're getting money from them, then you're not going to be, you know, as I say, a black mama on them when they're not doing their job.
Right. Right. That's almost as bad as the toll road situation in Texas. One of my pet peeves. Because again, you know, we're looking at two industries that are supposed to be privatized and, you know, doing their thing, but that's a whole nother show.
It's a whole nother discussion, and I've definitely had that discussion of the 3 Ps, the private, public-private partnerships. And I think we're starting to see a trend, and I've gone on WFAA to explain that these 3 Ps are not benefiting us as a general public. It's just, you know, you're a private organization getting public dollars, tax dollars, to just, you know, it feels like just to line your pockets, because that's exactly what it's for. Because I drove to Louisville. Yesterday, day before yesterday. Yeah.
And I-35 is actually worse. Yes. You know, they sold these projects as commerce projects, but traveling to Louisville is just a pain in the butt now, because unless you want to pay, you're stuck in these 3 minimum size lanes. Again, I'll go back to the energy part, because you know that's my passion on that part.
Yeah. And I do have another question. I think
moving forward, the state of Texas, the legislators are going to have to make sure the PUC has people that are qualified to run the job. You know, find out what their mission is, and then hire people in that, not just in that industry, because anybody can say they're in that industry, like the PUC leaders. You know, there's no reason to have 3 people with no energy say other than policy running the PUC, and they really need to review if ERCOT is, you know, do we need to hire engineers for the state? Right. Because if you hire engineers for the state and hire departments and fill manning in the departments under the PUC, we don't need an ERCOT, and we definitely don't need someone that has the stewardship of the Texas citizens being paid for by the people that they're supposed to be regulating. That would free all of that up. So, you know, somebody might hate it, but I don't see what ERCOT is for.
And I call for more common sense, ordinary, regular folks, us commoners, getting in those positions, because although, yes, there will be a learning curve, but it's a learning curve for anybody taking this on, you know, getting more, you know, regular people in those positions, because I think regular people, and I got master's degrees and all that kind of stuff, and I don't think that, you know, I'm the cat's meow, but I ask difficult questions, I ask hard questions, I ask questions that people don't like, and I have always gotten in trouble because of that. But I do have a question about Daniel here. Do you know Daniel? Because he sounds like he's in the industry, and he is raising questions and points that I'm like,
not sure, because I kind of like his questions though. I like his questions because they've been on point. Did he bring up another one? Does he have more?
Yes, he does bring up a point that there should be technical people on the boards. And I agree 100% with that, because this was a complete failure by regulatory agencies, by our state government, all in disguise as, oh, well, we're independent, we don't have to be on the federal oversight. And it's just hogwash that, you know, your desire to not have the feds in your business, you know, led to this.
It means they can pimp the state, that they can pimp the citizens of the state of Texas.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, you know, it's a travesty, and
you know, because we weren't always deregulated. We weren't always deregulated. We've only been deregulated, what, 15, 16 years now?
Yes, yes, yes. So it really hasn't gotten anybody anything. So James, I want to thank you for your time, and Daniel, I want to thank you for your questions and your comments. They were great. Hope to see you again on the show. As far as viewing, definitely reach out to me through Coffee and Politics on Facebook or on here on YouTube, because this is a much needed discussion, and the citizens have to get engaged and get involved in all levels of government to make sure that, you know, you're being protected, because these people will come back and ask you for your daggum vote every 4 years. And they need to justify, and you need to hold them to the fire, be it every 2 years, be it every 4 years, from railroad commissioner, you know, to your state reps and senators, to your governor, lieutenant governor, every level, municipality, to the state, to the federal government. Do not let them sleep, because as the commoners, they think we're asleep. They think they can get over on you, and it's costing us our lives. And apparently some people don't care about that. So with that being said, next week I'm having a discussion on mental health, trauma, and PTSD. So I have Dr. Curry coming on the show to have this discussion about how pervasive PTSD is, and how trauma changes the brain, and things that we can do as caretakers, friends, loved ones, family members, to someone who could be experiencing and had traumatic experiences, and they could be showing signs of PTSD. James, thank you so much for your time. We did go over. I'm sure we could come back and talk about this once we see if there are going to be any changes down in Austin. And if there are changes, they should be on the ballot come this November, so the people can vote on those legislative changes actually becoming law. So make sure that you pay attention to that, versus us making sure that the national anthem is played at sporting events. Because you may have had someone who lost a life, lost water, had property damage as a result of this past storm that we had. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. James, again, thank you for coming back on the show. Hope to see you again once we get some more details on what changes are going to occur as a result of this.
It'll be interesting.
It sure will.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.